Hi, this is Starkey Sower. Welcome again to another Plus Program training series. Today's topic is fermented foods, and this is part 2. So in the last series, we've been talking about this whole idea of fermented foods. We've been talking throughout the last 3 or 4 series, so to speak, about yogurts and kefirs, and then we talked about kombucha. And then on the first series on this, we talked about bone broth proteins and bone broths and things of that nature. And so we're going to finish this segment with lacto fermented foods. But let's do a quick review on bone broth for those that maybe didn't see that particular segment. So when we look at bone broth, it's kind of the new juice, so to speak, of today. Like 20, 30 years ago, juicing was the big craze, and right now, bone broth protein is like the big craze, or bone broth soup also being a huge craze. So a couple unique things about it. It helps with intestinal permeability or leaky gut syndrome, helps to kind of tighten the gut up, nourish the digestive system, make it better, stronger, so to speak. Also great as what they call a longevity tonic. A lot of people call bone broth soup, or what we call broken bone soup, a longevity soup. All right, so another thing is great for the immune system, nourishes the bones. Remember, the bones help to make what we call the stem cells, which ultimately make the white and the red blood cells. The other thing that it's also good for too is skin health, having type 1, type 2, and type 3 collagen, and also being super effective for joints, having glucosamine-glycans and glucosamine, chondroitin sulfate, all those different nutrients that are so beneficial for it. So that kind of maybe brings you up to speed. So next on the list, we're going to talk about lacto-fermented vegetables and fruits. So when we look at lacto-fermented fruits and vegetables, this is like a long tradition. We'll look at the tradition in a minute, but you might be thinking, why in the world would I want to lacto ferment fruits and vegetables? Well, when we lacto ferment fruits and vegetables, we actually take like kefir strains or like maybe parts of like yogurt, so to speak, and actually put it in with water and take the fruits and vegetables, put it like in a mason jar and put some tape over the top and let it sit for 3 to 5 days. What ultimately happens is this: the sugars as well as the starches ultimately get converted into lactic acid. You might be thinking, what's the benefit of lactic acid? Well, when we looked at lactic acid before, one of the things to remember is when we have lactic acid in the digestive system, what it does, it actually prevents bad bacteria from ultimately being able to grow. So that means that you're going to have a good, healthy intestinal tract along with some of the lacto-fermented fruits foods that you might have been consuming from before. This is really going to add to it. All right, so it kind of gives you a little foundation on it. Now, there might be some of your athletes might be thinking, hey, look, the last thing in the world I want is lactic acid because it's going to cause more muscle soreness and actually make me weaker. What we find is when there's adequate amounts of lactic acid in the digestive system, the body actually produces less lactic acid during workout. Might be a tip. All right, so let's look at some of the cultures. So let's look at the Romans. The Romans used all sorts of different types of cucumbers and picklings. Then you look at the Europeans, they use sauerkrauts. You look at the Russians ended up using all different types of peppers, then as well as green tomatoes. And you look at the Asian culture, and the Koreans for use have used kimchi. Kimchi is like a combination of different types of fruits and vegetables, typically cabbage-based. And then you look at the Japanese. Some of my favorite things from the Japanese culture are the umeboshi, which is the plums, the salted plums. So next on the list, you see the Latin American cultures use different types of carrots and radishes in lacto fermentation process, as well as the Chinese using all sorts of different things as well too. All right, so it kind of gives you a basis on some of those different things. Well, what are some of the benefits? When we look at some of the benefits, one of the biggest things to remember is this: digestion. It's going to help to increase the digestive force or the digestive process. So remember, when you eat a plate, you've got a plate of food, you're not eating a plate of lacto fermented vegetables or fruits. You're eating just a very small amount, almost like a condiment or maybe just like a little bit of a side dish. Ultimately, what this does is helps with the digestive process, helps the body digest more effectively, which means it's going to be a little less harmful on the digestive enzyme system, or a little less work, almost like Swedish bitters and things of that nature, kind of stimulating the digestive process. Maybe, in essence, it's almost like an enzyme capsule or a tablet. Remember one thing: as we get older, we have a tendency to reduce or actually lose the amount of enzymes that we produce. So a lot of individuals for years have used lacto-fermented fruits and vegetables to make this digestive process happen better. All right, so a couple different things about lacto-fermented foods. First of all, as we were saying, they actually use lactic acid cultures. And so ultimately, they also might use vinegar in the process as well. And so one of the things that happens when you use vinegar, as well as pasteurization, it kind of kills this lacto-fermentation process. So as you let the food sit out for 3 to 5 days, it kind of goes through the fermentation. Well, when you're using vinegar and pasteurization, it makes it where you can actually seal it up and put it on a shelf at a room temperature situation, non-refrigerated. If you're not doing that process, then the lacto-fermented fruits and vegetables have to be refrigerated. So ultimately, and we're going to talk to you about how to make them, at the end, you're going to have to refrigerate them when you're done. All right, but the stuff that you're buying on the shelf, the fermentation process after it's done, pasteurization process kind of sets in, and then that way it's shelf-stable, so to speak. All right, so you might be thinking, well, how do I make lacto-fermented fruits and vegetables? Actually, believe it or not, it's a pretty simple system. Dr. Mercola actually has a kit that you can buy. We sell them in the stores. And what it actually has, it has the lactic acid bacteria. You pour water in it, put the lactic acid bacteria, and then you stuff the fruits and vegetables. And it actually has a lid that goes on the top. You might remember, as I was saying earlier, a lot of times people will take like tape and they put it over the top of it, kind of set it off. Well, one of the negative things with tape is, well, maybe a bug or something could crawl in there, which would be a negative. Well, with the Dr. Mercola lid, seals on, it's got little holes in it, which allows the carbon dioxide to remove very effectively without bubbling or causing the container to blow up. And then after 3 to 5 days, take it and put it in the refrigerator and you're good to go. All right. So another way to make lacto-fermented fruits and vegetables is with a lactic acid culture. And this actually started years ago with Sally Fallon, probably in the late 1990s. She wrote a book called Nourishing Traditions. And she actually teaches you how to make your own whey product and actually make your own kefir product and actually use it specifically. I would highly recommend that you read this book. It's one of the reasons why all these crazy foods are coming onto the market. And when it comes to all the different types of crazy foods, if you look in her book, it's probably there without a question. So you might be thinking, it's been great to hear these series, but I want to know more. Highly recommend that would be the perfect starting place to help you out. So that kind of wraps up all sorts of fun foods that we've been talking about. Hopefully gives you a little foundation of what's hip and out there in today's food world and get you up to speed. This is Starkey Sowers. Thanks again for watching another Plus Program training series.